Hey folks, so here I am today and I'm joined by two of my very, very good friends, Fox and Al, and they've kindly come up to see me and stay at a mystery location which nobody knows unless you're those 4 people that have found it.
Stalkers.
Yeah.
Not including us, obviously.
No, well you did find me, thankfully, but I wanted you to.
Because you gave us your address.
I did, so you could come here and...
Yeah, finding someone's address online is not consensual address giving.
Especially when it's really hidden as well.
Yeah, it's not cool. Stop doing it.
Yeah. So yeah, we're actually here to make a film about Charlie as well. We're doing a vlog and a podcast and so on, but we're also here to make a short film about Charlie for part of our series called Trans and. So yeah, watch this space and it should be out quite soon.
We shot some really good footage and interviews and things.
Yeah, and we got to try out
a
a drone for the first time as well, which is exciting. Yeah.
We're like flying the drone and we couldn't see it anymore and everybody's like, where's the drone? It was so fun.
Yeah, I'm blown away by drone technology.
Yeah.
It's just quite incredible. So, that's the small talk over. Let's have some big talk.
Okay, let's do it. Right.
So, we were discussing some things last night over dinner, and one of those things really was the dynamics of telling people you're trans, and when sometimes you do want to tell people, sometimes you don't, and then the whole other situations and scenarios that can kind of come out of those situations.
That's right. And we were talking about how at the beginning of transition, what I noticed and what you noticed as well is that you kind of, I tended to give it all away. I'd be like, even when I didn't need to, I'd be like, oh, by the way, I'm trans.
Yeah.
And it does.
It's like walk into a shop and like, hi, I'm trans.
I like an umbrella and I'm trans.
I just want everybody to know.
Yeah. I'm just going to diffuse that one right now.
Yeah. But actually, it's not always necessary. And if, sitting on this couch, like we're all really out trans people, actually.
Yeah.
So.
Like if you Google any of us, you find that
all
it's
sorts
pretty...
of rubbish about us.
Yeah.
I find a bunch of threads on Mumsnet discussing how gross we are.
But also some lovely articles and interviews about, what you're doing with racing and, and also your column in the Metro and all sorts of things that we're doing, to try. And the reason I'm out is because when I came out as trans, I realised I was coming out into a world that didn't really understand trans issues at all, and I thought, well, that's got to change. So the only way to implement change is to be visible, if you feel safe to do so, obviously, because there's a large number of our community that don't feel comfortable doing that, and that's totally okay as well.
I know for me, when I was in the early days of my transition, it was very easy to just kind of out myself at any opportunity, because I think, people could tell I was trans probably just from looking at me and the way I presented.
That awkward stage,
yeah, and it was easier for me to, just to kind of get it out there and just
the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room, and also as a way to help kind of educate people as well, because I think that's just a common thing, isn't it? That so many people actually don't or haven't knowingly met a trans person.
Yeah. That's right.
I always find that's quite an interesting dynamic now when I meet people who, in situations where they obviously don't know I'm trans, and they probably don't know, cis people perhaps don't realise about all the trans people they meet.
That's right. They've never knowingly met a trans person before, even though they probably have. Chances are they
We think about this all the time, especially when we're travelling, and when we, for example, you help someone carry a bag down the stairs, or when you're on the train and you sit across someone and you start speaking to them. We wonder, all the time, if these people would know we're trans,
if they treat us differently,
would they react differently? Would their reaction be different? And we had a situation recently on the train where there was this elderly couple that was sitting across from us, and the woman was having some sort of anxiety issues, and she, started speaking to us just to sort of calm herself down
and explain why she was
because she was visibly and physically uncomfortable. And she started speaking to us, and she was going to visit her son or something, and then she started asking us what we do and why we were up in London, and we told her that we had just had a book event and we just published a book, and she started inquiring more about the book. And at this point in time we were like, do we just tell her that we made a book about trans teens and that we're trans people, or do we just sort of not tell her and just sort of vaguely say it was like a youth-related book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can find yourself in so many of those situations, I think, with people, can't you? Where you're like, you actually do make that conscious decision of like, oh, it's just easier to say this, or you go, yeah, well, it's all about being trans, and you know, we're trans, and then it opens up like a whole kind of I don't know, like a dialogue, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what we find 9 times out of 10, that when you do make yourself vulnerable like that and you talk about it, you know, they'll often say, oh, well, I was reading something about that recently and I was wondering what the deal was, or I've got a cousin who's just come out as trans, and you know, people are starting to have a better understanding of what trans people are actually like, as opposed to the horrible media representation of what trans people are like.
Yeah, and we decided to tell this couple on the train that we were actually trans. I just decided to go for it, and they were both really amazed, and the guy was like, oh my god, that's amazing, and he was like really excited about the book.
He was like, kudos, good on you.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, our son is gay, you know, and she like was trying to kind of connect. And so we were like, okay, that wasn't so bad. But you know, we didn't speak about it because, you know, obviously they're having a conversation with us, but I think it was going through both our minds, you know, at what point do we reveal this? Do we need to? You know, and even for people who are like some of the most out trans people, you know, in the UK, I'd guess, you know, we still have that choice, you know, day to day, whether we do want to come out to people, because we have that passing privilege as well, and that's an interesting topic unto itself. What does that really mean? And
I think, like you said just then, like, you know, two of probably the most visible out trans people in the UK, you still have that dynamic, like that never goes away,
right?
Even wherever you are in your life, that will kind of be a thing that that's with you.
Even though you've been on TV, on the radio, and you've been very public, you still have to come out to people all the time.
Or not.
Or not, you know. You have, well, if you have the choice of doing that, because you know, some trans people, as you said, don't have the passing privilege of being seen as cis, whereas others do for some reason. And sometimes trans people pass in certain situations and then in others they don't. And it's quite interesting that I mean, the further on it's been in my transition, the less any sort of misgendering or anything sort of has happened to me. But I remember at the start that it was quite difficult for me to pass, and people would always constantly know that I was trans. But it's changed a lot throughout the past 10 years since I've started transitioning.
Do you remember one of the first moments when you realised that you were actually passing? Because I remember quite distinctly, I was living at the Artist Residence Hotel because I had a residency there, and I was living there for about 6 months. And I was just kind of hanging about. I think I was preparing for my solo show, and there was a guest that was staying at the hotel who was a gay guy, and he was quite kind of taken by me, and he was like, oh, you're a very beautiful boy, you know, I've got this he said, I belong to this drawing club, and we invite beautiful boys to come along
to draw them
to come to this like a great manor house. Yeah, I know. And I was like, what? I knew exactly what he...
Oh my god, that was like the most intrinsic like pickup line in the world. Like, oh, we invite beautiful boys to come and be drawn naked. Why don't you come along?
You know, I'm gonna try that.
But I was very flattered, you know, because I was like, wow, this guy sees me as you know, masculine, and that's huge. And he couldn't see me in any other light, you know. He really, you know, and he was like, how old are you? And I told him how old I was, and he was like, oh, well, I know someone else who is your age but looks really young as well, like that.
And you're like, are they trans too?
Yeah, I know. Anyway, and he really wanted me to go there, but obviously I think he would have had a bit of a shock if I'd, you know, taken all my clothes off so they could draw me. So
maybe you should have done that.
I know. Oh gosh. How about you, Charlie? Do you remember
when I actually had those first moments when I was like, oh my god, I just passed, and I don't know.
Was it just little, like, just really tiny things, like?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because like I used to spend a lot of time in my job at that point in time on the phone, so I used to get to practice my voice a lot.
Right.
And that was quite interesting in itself because I could try different things with my voice. I remember at one point I had this very breathy Joanna Lumley type of.
Hello,
I remember this guy saying to me, he was like, oh, your voice, I could just lie down in a dark room and listen to that all day.
Wow, there's a whole career for you out there.
Wow.
Thank you.
And maybe I should resurrect that.
Yeah, maybe you should do some low-key sex work with, with like a voice, and people be like, oh, that's a very nice voice.
It sounds very ASMR, actually. There's a whole market for that.
Yeah. ASMR channel coming 2019.
That's
Get ready for the launch. It's coming. But I think that I think I actually learnt to pass on the phone before I could pass face to face with people.
Wow, yeah.
I think the real game changer for me was FFS, because that was just such a day and night shift between these. I think I passed sometimes before that, but it was always a bit touch and go.
Yeah, we have a friend who is in her 70s now, and she said when she had FSS, she only had minimal things change, just like these small things with her forehead and maybe with her jaw. And she said instantly, by making these really subtle changes, everybody suddenly saw her as a woman.
It was really like that for me, and I remember, like, because of the timing, it coincided with me. I did my first year of racing where I went back as trans, and then I had FFS. And it was really fascinating actually seeing how people reacted to me.
Yeah.
Because the first year I had like a small group of friends who were really like in the class that I raced in, who were really cool and
quite protective, I'd imagine, or just
Yeah, and I think but a lot of the other people around me in the paddock, you're talking maybe like, I don't know, 150 people.
It's a lot of people,
were quite standoffish.
Right.
But then I think the year when I came back and I'd had FFS, and then even in like that was something like November 2013 or something.
Right.
So in that time, I had 4 or 5 months after Christmas to suddenly be like, oh, I feel really good, and actually I feel really confident suddenly and happy. And I think that just showed. And people suddenly started reacting to me differently.
Yeah.
So it's amazing the difference.
Yeah. It's the whole package as well. It's like you feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
You're further down the line, I suppose, with hormones and things like that. And and then of course the surgery has a huge impact. But yeah. So what did you find? Like, what did you notice about the difference of being the way that you were treated?
I guess people just. I didn't feel like there was any kind of elephant in the room or any kind of stigma quite so much. Suddenly, I think I felt like people suddenly started viewing me as female.
It's almost as if they became comfortable with the way you look. It's just really strange, and people can't treat you nicely if something about your expression makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah. But as soon as you fall into that stereotype, people are like, oh, okay, I feel better, which is so...
It's sad
telling of how we treat people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's just like it's so unfortunate that sort of social dynamic exists because obviously for a lot of people they don't have access to FFS.
Exactly.
So, I was lucky that I remortgaged my house to pay for it.
Yeah, because you don't get that for free on the NHS here in England.
I'm still paying for it now, and I will be for some time. So it's not a.
Yeah, you do get it on the NHS in Scotland though.
Actually, you do, don't you?
Yes, all the trans people are going to move to Scotland now.
You do what you have to do. That's the thing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember a particular moment when I started passing. I think it was more gradual for me, but I think even before I started to transition, sometimes people would assume I was a girl, which is really interesting, and especially over the phone. If I was speaking to people on the phone and I would be, for example, in my parents' house and I would answer the phone, people would assume I was my mom.
Wow.
So I would pass all the time randomly in random situations and then in others not. So it was really sporadic how it sort of happened. But as my transition came more along, I started passing like fully as something people saw as a woman.
Now, I would think that would be quite an unusual experience because you both are saying that you kind of passed on the phone beforehand, and don't you think that's quite unusual for a trans feminine experience?
It is, because a lot of people go through, what do you call it, when your voice drops, and a lot of people get deeper voices from that. So it is quite uncommon, I think, for trans women or trans feminine people to pass on their voice alone,
because no amount of hormones is going to change your voice.
I mean, unless you have some sort of surgery, you cannot change your voice basically.
I mean, it was something when I knew I was going to start transitioning, I actually thought, even because there was probably 6 months before me deciding to try, okay, this is it, it's happening.
Right.
And then actually starting to live full time.
Right.
So even at that early stage, I was like, right, what's going to be a really critical thing? Voice.
Yeah.
And I started working on it even then.
Wow.
I had some really helpful sessions with a voice. What is it called?
Speech
therapist.
Yeah.
Cristella Antoni, actually, if anyone's looking for somebody to work with, who's really, really, really good. And it made a big difference to me, I think.
Yeah.
Because
your confidence and
and just even like being able to go into a shop. I remember all the situations prior to feeling comfortable with my voice, where I would go into a shop or any kind of situation where I'd be thinking, can I do this without actually talking to the people?
What a
or can I, how can I kind of structure the situation, the dynamic, so that I just have to say like a couple of things because as soon as they hear my voice, they're just gonna like, know that I'm trans.
Right.
I once said
so convoluted, those kinds of ways you try to create things to get around that.
Yeah, and it feels like, it feels horrible, doesn't it? Because there's so much to think about, and it can be quite an anxious time, for you, because you've got all these things that you're just like worried about and anxious about, and
I
there's
remember,
no way to live.
Yeah, I remember a situation where I was working in a shop at a cashier, and I was, putting the groceries through, and I say, would you like anything else, blah, blah, and the woman just turns to me and she says, are you a boy or a girl? And this was after I started transitioning, and I was obviously presenting in a feminine way.
As if you just asked somebody that.
I know that's outrageous.
And I was just like, I'm a girl. And she was just like, I was just wondering because your voice is a bit weird.
Wow.
And I was just like, who
are you?
Fuck are you? And I was like, I'm sorry, where do you, like, I said something like, oh, that's weird. So, and she was like, I was just wondering because I'm a teacher at school and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? She just started like unraveling in a weird way. Yeah, and I was just like, and I think I said something like, do you ask people that a lot?
Well, that's good that I'm glad you did ask that.
She's just like, no, actually I don't. I was like, no, because it's really uncomfortable.
Maybe she does, like, hi, how are you doing?
Are you a boy or are you a girl?
How's the weather today?
Are you a
boy or a girl?
This is a common question for you, because then I won't take it as personally. But, if this isn't a common thing for you, surely you can see why this would be uncomfortable for people.
Yeah. But I feel like now I have so much confidence that if somebody did ask me something like that, it wouldn't affect me and I'd laugh at them. But you feel so vulnerable at the start of your transition. You feel like you can't stand up for yourself. You only think about what you could have said later on. And
I still cringe at the way I reacted to situations now, thinking back, when I'm like, now I would just be like, sorry, who
are you?
Who? Like,
it's quite funny that before I transitioned, people refused to really see me as a man, and I'd be like a sissy or a fag or a pansy or even like a woman. But after I transitioned, I have never been called man more. Like, people call me man more now than even before I transitioned, which is quite interesting. And it's usually transphobic people or people on Mumsnet on Twitter or something that call me man basically every day. But this never happened before I transitioned, so it's really interesting to see how before everybody was like, oh, you're not a real man, and then I transitioned, everybody's like, oh, you're not a real woman or anything, you're still a man. And it's just like, it's so backwards the way people judge you.
Yeah. It's
outrageous.
It's like, which is it, people? It's like, make up your fucking mind. But I mean, I guess the joke's on them, since I'm a non-binary person anyway. So
somebody was saying the other day that non-binary identification is like the kryptonite of the trans world, because you can kind of you can use it, because often the arguments that people have, like, oh, you'll never be a woman. You're like, well, that's okay, because I'm non-binary. Or you'll never be a man. Well, that's fine.
People do that on Twitter with me too. They're like, you'll never be a woman. You're not a woman. I was like, I'm not even trying to be. It's just like, thanks, okay.
Yeah.
I sometimes get occasional comments on my YouTube videos when, I don't tend to sort of like really check them out and that much, but I'll just see some comments someone's put, and it's like, like real rant, where they're like, oh, damn it, you'll never be a woman, you're not a woman, Joe. And I'm just like,
thanks, Gerald.
And I'm just like, I'm like, I'm like, oh no, Yeah.
Well, you're right.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's really annoying.
I've made a huge mistake.
I'm like, God, that's just ruined my day.
Yeah, I just love how people think that their opinion matters in this context. It's like, no one cares what you think. Like, I'm not gonna change just because you don't think I'm a woman or you don't think I'm a man. It's just
and when was the last time any of us went out of our way to write abuse on someone's, video or a comment somewhere? Like, we just don't do that.
And I don't mean that, obviously. Like, I do read comments on my YouTube from fans and followers, and I do really appreciate them. What I meant by that is I don't go looking for negativity that people put on my
exactly because life's too short. Yeah.
Share the love, put negativity. Get out of town.
Exactly.
I guess we should probably finish on that positive note. So
for sure,
thank
Life's
you.
too short. Negativity.
Down with negativity. I don't want to hear your negativity. Get out with it.
Get out of it. Yeah.
I'm all about positivity.
Down with gender policing. That's it. No more. All right, cool.
Well, folks, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Charlie.
And I only just feel slightly surprised that my cat has not made a cameo appearance in this, because she's been all over us all weekend.
She has.
She was like in my face this morning, where she was like, "Hi, I want some food. Can you give me food?"
I'll just vibrate in your head.
I know.
Until you give me
so funny.
She's so cute.
Okay, folks. Well, let's wrap that up. And as always, please subscribe, comment below, and check out my content. I try to post it every week on a Wednesday at 8 o'clock, to the best of my ability.
Oh, and if you want to check out any more of us as well, we're on /Fox and Owl. And we also make films, which you should see Charlie's film on in a few months, on My Generation. So /My Genderation.
You can find us on Twitter and Facebook and all these social media places.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. Bye.